This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
Thank you, Ron Rohde. It's cold outside, and I have no desire whatsoever to go swimming. I don't even want to be caught in a cold rain. But what if you fall into water this time of year? Water's cold. In our program today, we look at the cold subject of cold water survival. Marine Law Enforcement Officer Shane Carrier and Boating Education Coordinator Zach Campbell for the state of Kentucky join us as we go inside outdoors on Kentucky Afield Radio.
I never knew I had an artistic flair until my best friend put a paintbrush in my hand.
More people are finding hidden interest because someone first took an interest in them.
Most of my groceries come from my garden. My neighbor taught me how.
If you're a sportsman or a sportswoman, who's the hidden hunter in your life? Asking someone to come along just might create lifelong interest.
It'll be a great trip. Got your camo?
Take aim on sharing a tradition.
Got it.
After all, someone did it for you. Google Kentucky Hunting to learn more.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear, flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. The natural tax shelter.
You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and you know one thing. Winter isn't the time for pleasure boating. But some adventurous types still like to get out and boat when it's cold. Kayakers, for one. I used to be one. Whitewater canoe, duck hunters, fishermen. Today, we're talking about the subject of cold water immersion. I hate cold water. That's just one thing I hate in life is being splashed with cold water. I don't even like a cold shower. I don't like a squirt gun. I don't like being hit with a water hose, while you're washing the car, thundering around. And one thing that these things all share in common, besides the fact I just don't like that kind of stuff, is that it comes by surprise. I'm not ready for it. I don't like being splashed, even when it's hot outside. Now, the fact is, you don't have to be on a boat to come into contact with cold water. You may be on a boat dock. Something startles you, gets your attention. Next thing, there's a misstep, and you're in the water. Today's guests are expert in the field of dealing with water, cold water, water rescue, boating safety. They are Major Shane Carrier, Kentucky's voting law administrator, and conservation law enforcement officer. That's a lot of hats you wear, Major. And Zach Campbell, Kentucky's voting education coordinator. Zach, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
This is not the time of the year to fall in the water. And I'm curious from a safety perspective. I don't really know where to go with this other than to say, I hope it doesn't happen to you. And if it does, are you a goner?
Well, it's like most things in life, you want to prepare. If you're going to be out on the water, you need to know some of the things that are going to keep you safe if the worst does happen. The most important thing, whether the water's cold or whether it's warm, is to have your life jackets on board. I
mentioned a minute ago that I was, once upon a time, a kayaker. And a friend of mine who is one of those dyed-in-the-wool, I mean, it doesn't matter any time of the year, he will be out there doing this. And he had a plan, he had a formula. He said if the water temperature and the air temperature added together equal at least 100, he'll go. I guess my point is, how cold is cold water?
It's defined as below 70 degrees. If you're in it long enough, you can start to get hypothermia over a matter of time. So a lot of people think cold water, really freezing cold water is what's going to affect you. Below 70 degrees can really start to bother you. I was, at the beginning of the week, actually in 49-degree water. We were doing some pictures for the Kentucky Afield magazine, and being the team player I am, decided to be a model. So we got me out, threw me in the water, wearing my life jacket. The pictures are illustrating things that would save my life. Obviously, the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife officers were the main reason that my life would have gotten saved in these pictures. But wearing my life jacket, and I was portraying a duck hunter, a waterfowl hunter, whose boat had gone under. So one of the main things, besides the life jacket, is I wasn't wearing waders. So there's a lot of things you can do to protect yourself.
The people who this will most likely affect, who are probably the biggest listeners to this program, would be sportsmen and women, people who like to fish, people who like to hunt, people who like to boat.
That is correct.
Now, let me ask you, Major Carrier, do you run into this in the field or on the lake or on the river where these sportsmen and women really don't see themselves as boaters and all this boating safety malarkey just doesn't apply to them?
It's very common, unfortunately, and you are correct. Most of the people that we will see on the water this time of year are sportsmen. We have some cold water fishermen that like to get out and brave the elements. They'll fish all winter long, as there's, the lake's not frozen. We will have a tremendous amount of duck hunters that will take to our lakes and streams during the winter months. We don't have as many recreational boaters. I have seen skiers out.
Skiers?
It's not uncommon for them to wear a bodysuit and ski during the winter months, but it's rare. It's geographic specific. Some lakes will have a ski club that will try to ski through the winter months, but primarily it's our sportsmen. And what I've noticed is they are concentrating more on their quarry, ducks or fish, and they get distracted by what they're doing, make sure they have all their decoys, all their equipment's in order, and they forget about the boating aspect of it and exactly how much danger they could potentially be in because of the cold water.
I don't want to pick on people who hunt ducks and fish in the winter. That's perfectly legitimate pastimes, and they can go and they can do well at it, and they love their day.
That's absolutely correct. They just need to be conscientious that the water that they're out there on during the winter months participating in these sports is entirely different than what they've spent this summer, maybe recreational boating with the family, swimming in those same waters. If they end up in those waters during these winter months, the outcome could be significantly different. They're going to notice the onset of hypothermia very quickly. It's going to affect their swimming ability. They're going to have a lot more clothes on to stay warm just because of the elements. When you get in the water with those additional clothing, when they get saturated, it makes swimming that much tougher.
We have an entire program to devote to cold water immersion and how to save your butt if you fall in, regardless if you're fishing or you just trip and fall or who knows what. You never know. Chances are it's not going to happen to the vast majority of the people, but interesting to know what they should do should it happen. Just to have this in your pocket in case that day ever comes. You were talking about the article in Kentucky Afield magazine in the current issue, winter of 2012-13, and you fell in. Now, you could go in with neoprene on and something that would keep you warm despite the fact it was 49-degree water. But you weren't wearing any of this, were you? You just had on your regular street clothes.
If I were an actual waterfowl hunter at the exact day that I was out, I wouldn't have been wearing all that warm stuff because it was pretty warm outside. I mean, probably about 60 degrees that day, and I wasn't wearing any neoprene. I wasn't wearing any of that. But if one thing about that event, I had gone in 6 or 7 times, and when you're talking about one of the rules of cold water immersion, you've got 3 steps to that. The steps are 1, 10, and 1. That stands for 1 minute, 10 minutes, and 1 hour. So that first minute is the immersion factor. You get in there, you go into cold shock. That's when people get into a lot of trouble because you get involuntary breathing and gasping and you suck in water. That definitely happened when I went in. So that first step happened. Then you've got your 10. That after that first minute, the 10 minutes after is when you start to lose your motor skills. You start to lose the way your extremities, they're not performing properly. So all your blood's being drawn to the center of your body, and that really surprised me that the way that happened. After I was in the water for such a long time, I was 5 feet from the dock. and reaching out to the officer, and I could no longer swim to get to him. So
you could not swim 5 feet from the dock.
No, there was a slight breeze which was catching my life jacket, and just that slight breeze, I could swim. If my life depended on it, I couldn't have saved my life if I was actually in that situation.
I want to talk more about this. We're up against the break, but we'll be back talking with Zachery Campbell, the Kentucky Boater Education Coordinator, and Major Shane Carrier, Conservation Officer and Boating Law Administrator. We will be back on Kentucky Afield Radio. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. In the studio talking about survival of sorts, cold water survival. If you fall in, if you're boating this time of year, boating in cold water, these are the folks that are in the studio with me that know a little bit about that. It's Kentucky's Boating Education Coordinator, Zachery Campbell, and Major Shane Carrier, Conservation Officer, and also serves as Kentucky's Boating Law Administrator. Here's something interesting to keep in mind. It may be January. It may be February or March. It may have a sunny day, and it may turn off to be beautiful.
Exactly.
That water is still cold.
Yeah, the warm days that we experience in the winter doesn't change the water temperature. It doesn't warm up that significantly, that much during these warm days. I was down at Kentucky Lake yesterday, and lots of boaters out, lots of fishermen, crappie fishing, but they need to realize that water temperature is still, 48 to 52 degrees, which is still very, very dangerous if they fall into it. So,
Zach, you were talking a little bit in the break that you would expect boating fatalities to occur when there's more boats on the water, more crowded, like a busy highway of sorts.
Your summer months and your early fall months, that's where all the boating recreators are out. They're out having a good time, and the water's warm, but there's a lot of traffic, so you would expect that most of your fatalities and accidents happen during that time. And like you said, Major Carrier, it's the water's still cold at certain types of year, and one of the most dangerous times of the year is spring. Everyone looks around, and the birds are chirping, flowers are blooming, but it takes that water a long time to heat up, and the water's still really cold. So I went through all our Kentucky boating fatalities accidents from 2003 to current, and I broke it up in between winter-summer category, fall-summer category, and winter-spring category. So we got your cold water months and your warm water months. And surprisingly, even though there's so much more activity during the summer and the fall, there were 72 total fatalities, and there was 36 in the summer. It was a dead even, and 36 in the cold water months. So
it was split 50-50.
50-50.
That would lead me to believe that maybe, I'm guessing, that in the warm water months, I'm going to guess somebody maybe partying too hard or took a spill on their skis. I don't know, I'm guessing. And in the winter, has to be cold water related. How close am I?
I think that's a very accurate assumption based on our statistics. A lot of the summertime months where they could have been fatalities due to boat accidents, or, like you said, fell out, hit the head, something like that caused an injury or a drowning. Wintertime, it's almost, I would say, primarily due to the cold water and the hypothermia and the decreased ability to swim effectively.
We have a saying around the boating community, your life jacket's got your back. Now, where do they fit into the scheme of things for saving your life in cold water?
When I spoke earlier about that 1-10-1 deal, that applies if you're wearing a life jacket. You can survive that 1 minute. You can, if you're not wearing a life jacket and that initial cold water shock, you can suck in water and go under right then.
So when you fall in, it is such a shock to your body.
Mm-hmm.
I've not done it, and I'm not planning to do it to learn. But you say it happened to you in the magazine shoot. but you fall in and go.
That's exactly right.
And
no different than when you described at the beginning somebody throwing cold water on you. It so-called takes your breath, as everyone says.
It takes your breath away.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the 10-minute part where you're getting used to the water, but you're losing your motor skills and you're losing your ability to swim. Okay, if you don't have a life jacket on, you're not going to make it to that third step. You're not going to even make it to hypothermia, because before you're going to go under. You're not going to be able to swim without your life jacket. You're not going to be able to float. So wearing your life jacket is the way to avoid that.
The life jacket will keep you afloat. It will protect you from drowning. It will not protect you from hypothermia.
Well, let me just say this. I'm a good swimmer. I don't need a life jacket.
Well, you couldn't be any further from the truth by that statement, especially in cold water.
I don't fool with those things. I know how to swim.
Well, that is a misleading misconception among the boating public. Regardless of how well of a swimmer you think you are, you can drown easily without a life jacket. Warm water or cold water, but especially so in cold water.
So when you're swimming, especially, it seems like would be doubly bad in cold water, that you have fallen in. It could be that your boat took a misturn. You fall in. When you fall in by surprise.
Yeah, you don't plan for it.
You don't plan these things, and you may have a fish hook in your finger. You may have one in your cheek. You may have waders on, and next thing you know, they're filling up.
Mm-hmm. You could have hit your head when you fell.
Absolutely.
And if you're unconscious, the life jacket will still float you.
Chances are you're going to be mad,
mm-hmm.
or you're going to say, God, I hope nobody saw this.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do now? This is not supposed to happen to me.
And when you fall in and you're not wearing your life jacket, if you've got it stored on the boat and you're following the law and you have a life jacket per person on your vessel, it's so easy just to wear it, because if, like we said, if you fall in by surprise. You're not going to be able to most likely get back in your boat or put your life jacket on. You need to have it on before you fall in.
We have a feeling like government is telling me what to do, and I don't like that. Or a mother has said, son, I told you not to run with those scissors. And it sounds a lot like that, but there's some truth to this, that if you're in a boat, if you're on the water, wearing a life jacket, may not keep you warm, but it'll save your life by letting you breathe. And cold water immersion here is the focus of this conversation. Because if you're cold, you are quickly becoming unable to dog paddle to
That's
keep
correct.
yourself afloat.
That's correct.
Now, we can presume you are hopefully at least with somebody. We're assuming that you are not in the middle of Lake Barkley.
That's right.
There are some things that we hope, if this happens, doesn't enter into your situation. But it might.
It could, yes. We recommend having someone with you just in case something like this happens. But every day we have sportsmen go out on our waters in these cold weather months by themselves. And that is an increased risk that they are taking. But if they take proper precautions ahead of time and prepare, as Zach said, their chances of survival if they end up in the water increase greatly.
I'm gonna venture a guess. If this were to happen to me, now correct me when I'm wrong here. If this were to happen to me, first thing I'm going to do is panic. It's going to be cold,
Yes.
and I am going to freak out, trying to get warm again. And if my boat is there, I guess I'm going to try to climb up in the boat.
Mm-hmm.
If the boat has drifted away and I can't, well, what do I do? What can I do to help me, to help myself?
Well, there's a posture that the boating safety community says that you should adapt. It's called HELP. It's heat escape lessening posture, and it's basically and this only works again if you're wearing your life jacket, because you bring your knees to your chest, and you pretty much get assume the fetal position while you're out there floating, and that helps for less heat to escape your body. You can stay out there longer and hope that you can be rescued in time.
Now, let's say you're doing this. but you know it's probably going to be a lost cause. I've been in Lake Cumberland, and my boat, this was summertime. I was by myself. It was an outboard boat. It ran out of gas. I said, well, I can swim to shore. Harder to do than you think, even in warm summer weather. Harder to do. Where does help come from? How do you call for it? It's winter.
It's winter.
Where does this help come from? You have to, the first person to help you save yourself is you.
It's you. That's exactly right. Because there are so few people on our water during these cold weather months, the chances of someone coming along to help you are pretty slim, actually. You can hope for that there's another duck hunter out there that comes by, or maybe a winter fisherman, but the crowded lakes of summer are not there. There's just not that many people to render assistance during those cold weather months. So you're right. It's going to be up to you and how you prepared yourself to save you, unfortunately, the majority of the time.
I want to talk more about hypothermia itself, when it sets in. It's not immediate. But when we come back, talking about cold water immersion, cold water, in a sense, cold weather survival. If you happen to be a water lover or a boater or a hunter or a fisherman, duck hunter, we'll talk more with Major Shane Carrier, Kentucky's boating law administrator and boating education coordinator, Zachery Campbell, when we come back. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. Charlie Baglin back in on Kentucky Afield Radio with timely advice on winter boating. On a calm day, 40 degrees really ain't so bad. But if it's breezy out, it will blow a chill right through you. It's piercing cold. I'm on the phone with Mike Callahan with the National Weather Service. And Mike, please explain to me wind chill.
Most definitely. Wind chill actually came out of military research. They noticed that frostbite was occurring at lots of different temperatures.
The simplest example of wind chill, let's say you burn your finger and you lick it and you blow on it.
Wind chill, true wind chill, you wouldn't lick it. You would just blow on it. When you lick it, you're actually getting another physical process in there, evaporation. Anytime you evaporate water, that requires energy and that cools your skin. So that's the reason why when you sweat and you get a nice wind on there, your skin gets cooled down. I'm looking at a National Weather Service wind chill chart. So, for example, if it were 0 degrees outside and you had a 10-degree wind chill, and I'm just looking at the chart, it makes it feel as if it were a minus 16. Right. Oh, you go outside, well, the temperature says it's 35 degrees. I can take that. But then the next thing you know, it's a 25-mile-an-hour wind. Yeah. And that's a whole other story. Exactly. Yeah, the stronger the wind, the more efficient it is pulling the heat away from your body. That's the reason why when you get water involved, the efficiency is even much, much greater. If you're wet, it compounds it. Yeah, because like I said, back to your original example, if you burn your finger and you lick it and you blow on it, that finger's going to cool off faster because you're taking some of the energy by evaporating the water that's on your finger. The same thing would happen if you were wet and in a strong wind. As the water evaporates from your clothing, or even if your exposed skin, your body would cool off much, much faster. So the wind chill chart presumes that you're dry. Yes, sir. Is there such a chart that would take into account if you are wet? I've never seen one. That would be interesting. That would be interesting for boaters because... Definitely. Or even if you're out in the rain. Right. You've been running and you're sweating. If you're wet for whatever the reason is, it'd be nice to know just how cold does it feel now. So wind chill is kind of like just a first guess in the best conditions. It's really just a way of calculating how fast frostbite can occur to exposed skin during certain conditions. Most of the charts I've seen actually have like colored areas, and when you get into the darker colored areas, frostbite can occur very, very quickly. Frostbite times, if it is a light blue, if it is a darker blue, you get down to this purplish color, can occur within 5 minutes. Yes. Yeah, it doesn't take long. People don't realize how fast it can occur. So if you're wet, it can even occur faster. My last question is that a lot of people will get wrong. Westerly wind. Is that wind blowing from the west or toward the west? It's from the west, and that drives mathematicians crazy because mathematicians always think of things moving to, but a west wind is from the west. The north wind is from the north. And that's because it comes from the way sailors used to think about winds. A north wind was a cold wind.
Mike Callahan, I certainly appreciate the advice you've given here this morning.
Well, it is very, very dangerous to fall into cold water. You just don't realize what happens to your body and how quickly it happens when you get into that situation. There have been cases of people dying of hypothermia falling in water as warm as 60 degrees.
Holy smoke. Well, I'm glad we were able to catch up. I've learned a lot.
Okay.
More on the thrills and chills of winter boating after the break.
Stretch!
It's not easy reaching your arms around a giant white oak tree.
Mom, I can't reach your hand.
It's not easy finding one either, but old-growth woodlands are another example of what Kentucky Nature license plates work to protect.
Big tree.
And even though this boy's in 5th grade, he might see college before those fingertips meet. And with some of these trees, he may still need a little help from his sister.
Oh, brother.
Kentucky Nature Plates. No wonder they say nature's finest. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. In the studio with me are cold water experts, boating experts, Major Shane Carrier with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife's Law Enforcement Division, and he is also the boating law administrator, so if it has to deal with the boating law in this state, it passes your desk, doesn't it, Doc?
It does.
And Zachery Campbell, a specialist in boating education, Kentucky's boating education coordinator. You know, we all get this sense of, God, I'm glad that wasn't me, when we're watching the evening news and they talk about these harrowing rescues, or somebody who saved themselves a skiing accident, or somebody buried in an avalanche, or somebody on a boat that would have been sure death, but yet they rose above it and somehow live to tell the story the next day or the next week. Hopefully that will never be any of us here in the studio or anybody ever listening, but you never know, it could. We're talking about cold water immersion, and you spent a good number of years in the field, Major Carrier. What was your role?
I did.
Where were you in the state of Kentucky on patrol?
I primarily patrolled Taylorsville Lake, which lays in Spencer County and a little in Anderson and partially in Nelson. I spent the majority of my career just about every weekend on Taylorsville. I also spent some time patrolling the Ohio River around the Louisville, Jefferson County area, and also a little bit on Rough River Lake down in Breckenridge County.
The Kentucky Wildlife boating folks aren't the only unit folks out there that are interested in this. I know there's a unit of the Coast Guard in Louisville, and there's a few of you scattered around, but
there is.
The group that is in charge of recreational boating law enforcement in this state is
Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Conservation Officers. We are charged with enforcing all of the boating laws for the Commonwealth. So we spend a large percentage of our time on the water enforcing these laws.
Without mentioning names or bringing up any bad memories, can you describe some harrowing incidents that you've seen?
I can. I have a couple of instances that come to mind. One involved a fisherman on the Ohio River. We just happened to be out patrolling that day, and it was not what I would call winter months. If recollection is right, it was probably late October-ish. Water was still significantly cooler than it was during the traditional summertime boating and swimming months. But the fisherman had hit a submerged log, and actually the motor had come loose from the transom of the boat, and the boat was taken on water, and it had actually sank by the time we arrived to where he was at. Luckily, he was in a high population area along the river where someone on the bank on the dock seen this happen. And by the time we got there, he was in the water. And he'd been in the water maybe 15 minutes or so, but fortunately he was wearing his life jacket. But by the time we got to him and got him out of the water, we could already see the onset of hypothermia. Water temperature was probably 65 degrees, which sounds relatively warm, but no longer than he was in the water, we were already starting to see the effects of it. He had extreme chills, color was leaving, extremities were numb. He couldn't. We tried to throw him a ring buoy, and he was having trouble grabbing onto it, so we finally were able to maneuver our boat close enough that we could take our boat hook that we keep on the boat, hook to him and pull him in so we could get him out of the water, get him warmed up. So that's one instance that I can recall where I know without a doubt that him having that life jacket on saved his life. Fortunately for him, we were close, or there was someone close in a boat that could come and get him out of the water relatively quickly.
You mentioned 2 or 3 things there that I think enter into this. One, it was late October.
Mm-hmm.
Had it been January, you may not have been as lucky. He may not have been as fortunate.
That's correct.
There may not have been somebody on the bank.
That's exactly right.
Fortunately, he was wearing a life jacket, and you had said he had been in the water for 20 minutes?
Yeah, approximately 20 minutes. By the time we ran upstream to get to him, by the time the person on the bank actually noticed him, his boat was partially sank, and he was already in the water. So
20 minutes, and he was so incapacitated that he could not reach out to grab a water ring.
That's correct.
Or could not grip a rope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is hypothermia setting in.
That's exactly what that is.
So when someone falls into the water, and it is cold water, hypothermia, it isn't instant. Zach, you teach boating safety. How does hypothermia come up? What do you have to say? What's the minute message?
As I spoke before about I'm bringing up that good old 1, 10, and 1 again. After that first 10 minutes, depending on how cold the water is, like you said, Major Carrier, that took 20 minutes. After that first 10 minutes, you can start feeling the effects of hypothermia, and then you have it up into around an hour, depending on how cold the water is, and you can actually lose consciousness with the hypothermia. Once you get in, you start to lose the use of your extremities. You can go into shock. You can be out there floating. You can become disoriented. And say your vessel goes under, your boat goes under, and it gets swamped, and still a portion of it floating. Instead of trying to swim to safety, because as we've spoken, most likely you're not going to be able to swim in a short amount of time, it's good to get up as much of your body out of the water as possible and climb up on that vessel, because the air is much warmer than the water, and you can actually last longer until help arrives.
50-degree air temperature is much warmer than 50-degree water, for sure.
Absolutely.
So your fingers are going to go numb. Your toes will go numb. Next, I assume your arms and your ability to do much, because all your blood is going to your heart to keep your core body temperature as warm as it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And you could start to go into shock. From the experience when I was in the water, I was in on and off about 20 minutes. Afterwards, I was really cloudy for the day. I remember coming back up to the office, and it just takes a while for your core temperature to get back up. If you're out there, you can not know what direction you're swimming in. You can really lose your cognitive ability to make decisions. So it's quite a dangerous situation.
If I'm out there and this happens to me, I guess our first instinct would be, I'm going to swim to shore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you were saying in the photo shoot you were 5 feet away. You couldn't swim.
Yes, 5 feet away from the dock.
Going into this, when you fall in, you're going to have an initial reaction to the cold water on your body. Nobody likes that. Like stepping into a cold shower, getting splashed. After a minute or two, just like when you jump into a swimming pool, you get used to the water.
Sure, yeah.
And that's the part that nobody wants to be in it long enough to get used to the water.
Yeah, you get acclimated to it rather quickly. And, once you realize that hypothermia is not going to kill you immediately as soon as you hit the water,
but
you have some time to think and get your thoughts straight and make rational decisions before hypothermia sets in to the point that it, like Zach says, it reduces those abilities. So
you may have 10 minutes or so where you are thinking clearly.
Sure.
Your body still works, and you can think this through.
If you're wearing your life jacket.
If you're wearing your life jacket. Good point.
How close do you have to be to shore to say, it's worth my time to leave this boat and swim to shore?
The U.S. Coast Guard has done studies throughout the nation as far as fatalities, and most deaths occur 5 to 10 feet from safety. And these are people that fall in unexpectedly, gasp in water, and are not wearing life jackets. So if you're wearing your life jacket, I don't know That depends on how cold the water is, how busy the body of water is as far as other people on the water. If you have, if you've made a float plan and people know that you're out there, people know where you are, where you're located, all those aspects fall into that.
Sure. Each situation is going to be different, and you're just going to have to make a conscious decision. If you got your life jacket on, the chances of you drowning should be, tremendously reduced. So now you're to the point, do I leave, if my boat is partially floating, if it's giving me some flotation on top of my life jacket, do I leave it and go to shore, or do I stay with it and hope help comes? So those are the things you're going to have to look at and make a conscious decision, because you need to get out of the water and dried off and warmed up as soon as possible. So,
I am guessing that sometimes the shore is a little farther away than you think.
Water is very deceptive when it comes to judging distances. It is a lot different than most people walking around every day on dry land can pretty well tell how far something is away. It is really amazing how deceptive water can be. Things look much closer than they are when you think, I'm a good swimmer, I can swim, out to that buoy and back, or I can swim from here to the bank. And then once you get started and you're, think you're almost there and look up and you're not even a third of the way, it's very deceptive.
I'm wondering how many people are going to remember, if they have heard this to begin with, will remember this should crisis happen. I was doing a little bit of research before you all got here, and it said, if you actually start to swim to shore, don't stop. Mm-hmm. Even if it's a little farther than you thought, don't stop.
Don't stop till you reach your destination. That's correct.
A trust that adrenaline will kick in.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking with Major Shane Carrier, of many years a wildlife boating officer, conservation officer with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. Now an office job, but still very much just as important, with the boating law administrator for the state of Kentucky. Also in the studio, Zachery Campbell is the Kentucky Boating Education Coordinator. You teach a lot of people, Zach. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Some final thoughts when we come back for our last segment.
Okay.
Stay with us. My name's Charlie Baglin. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. I'm Charlie Baglin, talking with Major Shane Carrier, Conservation Officer and Boating Law Administrator, and cold water survival expert of sorts, seeing what happens when people don't do it correctly, and Zachery Campbell, a Boating Education Coordinator for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We have been talking this past hour about cold water immersion, cold water survival. It could happen to you if you're out ice skating on a pond and you break through the ice. Or it could happen to you if you're out fishing. It could happen to you if you're out kayaking.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hunting waterfowl. Did you just cite a statistic a little bit ago that waterfowl hunters, I don't want to pick on waterfowl hunters, but if that is the body that is predominantly using our waterways when it's cold.
It is.
We're talking to you. This could help save your life, make your hunting day a little bit better than it might otherwise be.
Absolutely. Yeah, the U.S. Coast Guard statistics show that waterfowl hunters, more of them die each year from drowning or hypothermia than what most people would think would be firearms-related accidents, because they're involved in a hunting sport, but actually it's drowning.
It should be said, hunting is a safe sport. Fishing is a safe sport. What we're talking about when things will inevitably go awry.
Absolutely.
And it can happen to you.
It can, just because of the environmental factors that we are forced to operate in to participate in these sports. They add an extra element to the whole survival aspect of it.
My hat's off to anybody that will go out in a boat. And buddy, I've done it. My hat's off to myself, but you all boat recreationally in the winter? You go fishing, or you all out there? Could this happen to you?
I'm a big fisherman, so.
And I'm a big waterfowl hunter, so I can relate from both the my occupation and from my personal experiences been in situations like this. I spent a lot of time on the water in the winter months.
So we've established that if this happens to you, if you fall in, the best thing you can do is, one, wear a life jacket.
Have your life jacket on and get out of the water as soon as possible and get dry clothing on, get warmed up to prevent the onset of hypothermia.
And Zach, you're saying even if your boat is 3/4 of the way underwater, climb up on top of whatever's left of it.
Yes.
To get most of your body out of the water.
Yes, and I'd like to also state that the best way is to prepare and make sure this doesn't happen. So there's 3 main steps you can take to keep yourself safe on the water. Say you're a fisherman in the winter or a waterfowl hunter. Especially on the waterfowl side again, you don't overload your boat. A lot of the accidents, you can attest to this, Major, is that the waterfowl hunters have so many equipment that they overload the boat. They don't have enough freeboard, and water comes in and swamps the boat, and they end up in the water. So
safety equipment is
imperative. And, waterfowl hunters, traditionally hunt out of a smaller boat, so it's less conspicuous to the waterfowl hunters. It's easier to hide. It's probably not a boat that they use on a regular basis throughout the year. So it's smaller. They're carrying more equipment. They've got dogs. They've got decoys. They've got guns. Smaller boat. And they may have an inkling to leave maybe some of the required safety equipment behind, thinking, well, we don't need that.
It doesn't apply to me.
Doesn't apply to me. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because they probably will need it worse in those situations than they would have in the summertime in their recreational boating.
There are life jackets you can wear and hardly ever see.
Absolutely.
What's the minute message on belt packs and personal flotation devices and such, Zach?
Well, with technology these days, we've got these great options. That a lot of the complaints for fishermen that have to cast or waterfowl hunters that have the gun up against their shoulder is that the life jacket can be somewhat cumbersome and get in the way. We've got inflatable devices now where you've got a normal life jacket that you put on. It's very light and thin. You barely even notice that it's on.
Mm-hmm. It's a vest type.
Yeah, yes, a vest. And you've also got a belt pack that you can wear. And both of these models, you fall in the water, then they inflate. They have a cartridge, a CO2 cartridge that goes off and inflates the whole thing. It's a great way for waterfowl hunters and fishermen to not get their life preserver in the way when they're trying to do the sport they love. And even our officers use the inflatable vests. They're a great new thing in technology.
They are, and I would highly recommend that if they're looking to purchase one of these, that they offer a manual inflatable type and an automatic. The automatic adds another element of safety in the event that if you fall into the water and you could potentially hit your head on the side of the boat or whatever it may be and knock yourself unconscious. The automatic will still inflate. It's water activated, which will inflate and keep your head above water when you're wearing the vest type. Even if you're unconscious, it'll save you.
Of course, it's not going to happen to me. And anybody listening, well, that's great, but it's not going to happen. It doesn't really apply to me. I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to do that. It won't happen to me. For some reason, I'm impervious to crisis in my life. This is taught under your program, Zach, of boater education. Where are these taught? Who should take them?
It's advised that everyone take the course. They can be taught online. We have them online. You can take them, get your boater education blue card. Our officers teach them every year. So there's multiple opportunities for the public to take the course.
Is there any final thought that you would want to leave folks with?
Your life jacket's got your back.
And we can't stress enough to wear your PFD. It's going to aid you in surviving. And the bottom line is, if you fall in the water and it's extremely cold and there's no one there to get you out and you don't have a life jacket on, you're not going to make it.
A whistle. A life jacket and a whistle.
And a whistle. Yeah, those inflatables we discussed, most of them have a whistle made on them. So for that purpose, they're built in. But if you don't have that, you fall in this cold water, no one's around to get you out immediately, you're not going to make it.
Last question. Do you text and drive?
No, sir.
Mr. Carrier?
Absolutely not.
There is more online to be found out about cold water immersion and boating safety from any number of sources. Now, the official website is fw.ky.gov. We're out of time. I'm Charlie Baglin. Join us again next week on Kentucky Afield Radio.